Our next talk is from my colleague Cathy Bauman from Department of Population Medicine, and Cathy's research has mostly to do with goat health and goat milk quality, and that's what she's going to tell us a little bit about right now. Thanks, Cathy.
Thanks for the opportunity to come talk about our little lesser-known dairy industry. I do both dairy sheep and dairy goats. I love this field. Producers are fun, a little bit rigid on some things, which we'll get into a little bit later. But I feel like every time we do a study, we make great advancements and really help them out. So I'm hoping what I share with you today has some applicability to what you all are doing in the dairy cow side as well. So it's a little bit of, like I've said, tales from the far side. Sorry, clicker. Okay, there we go. I'll go really quick. I don't have a ton of time, and I tend to be a quick speaker anyway, so that should be okay. But for those of you not familiar with our industry, we're licensed under the Ontario Milk Act. We don't have a lot of producers, so compared to you, we're quite a bit smaller. But just so you know, kind of in our own industry in North America, Ontario is a pretty big mouse. The majority of milk is made into cheese, and the majority of that is then exported to the U.S. So we've been a little bit nervous with the tariffs and what have you going forward. Milk quality is an issue. It's regulated under the Milk Act that back to scan should be less than 321,000. So for those of you on the cow side, it's a little bit shocking. On the somatic cell count, it's just recommended that we're below 1.5 million, okay? It's currently not penalized if they are over that, it's just encouraged. As of January 2026 though, this is changing, so this is an exciting time to see how this influences the industry going forward, is the 1.5 million count will be enforced. So to look back last year, back to scan on average was 111,000, somatic cell count was 1.4. So easily we're under the threshold for bacteria. Going forward, somatic cell count is going to be an issue, and we have a lot of producers that are suddenly very nervous. About 10% on average in a year are kind of struggling with that penalty level, and then multiple times through the year are exceeding that range. So at the farm level, the average milking herd is about 420 goats. So we're talking a large number of animals that we're trying to manage at any given time. We have producers with 3,000 that they're easily milking. It ranges from hand milking to side-by-side parlors, and we have a few rotaries. There is a long-held belief that somatic cell count does not represent the mastitis that may be going on at the udder level or bacterial counts. So they've kind of put their head in the sand and just feel like that's irrelevant for them, okay? So then udder health is very poorly uptaken, and then some of the other preventative measures. The reason behind this is we often see elevations as the stage of lactation goes on. Anytime they go in estrus, the levels spike. They spike after they've kidded and what have you. We've tried to explain to them that they're already elevated and they're just going up a bit further, but again, there's this disconnect. We have little to no lactanet testing because they don't feel like it has value, and very little use of the California mastitis test. So really an uphill battle on the milk quality side. Also affecting this is the fact that we batch kid, so we have kidding 2 to 5 times a year in big numbers. Like we're not just having one cow calve a week, we're having 60 to 100 to 300 goats giving birth. And so we have a turnover in the herd, sometimes 25% at a time. Milking pens are ordered by stage of lactation. I've highlighted this because we're gonna come back to it as we go through a case study at the end. And like I said, the subclinical mastitis is under-recognized, udder hygiene almost non-existent, and troubleshooting bulk tank milk quality has been really frustrating. It's not standardized, and we don't have a way of successfully improving it for the long term. And I've been on these farms, have worked with OMAF, tried to help these farms long term, and it's just extremely frustrating. So that's where this milk quality study came in. We wanted to look at it from the goat side, the bulk tank side, everything in between. It's a hard time sometimes getting money for the small ruminant industry because we don't have a lot of money to leverage. So when we do, we try to make the most of it. So we were looking animal side, bulk tank side, and then administering a questionnaire. So all that has now been done. We did that 2.5 years ago. It completed, the student defended in January. So our main results are we validated the use of composite samples. I know you've taken that for granted in the dairy cow side for many years, but we had to go back and show that that worked for goats. So somatic cell count with composites was reflective of the two udder halves. IBC was as well, but the individual bacterial counts, but it a little bit underestimated the two udder halves when we looked at it. We determined there was, in fact, a linear relationship between somatic cell count and the back-to-scan content of the milk. Yay, this is a really good sign, right? Because now if we screen those animals based on somatic cell count, hopefully we can then pull out the high bacterial shedding goats from these herds. So the key being, we weren't talking about subclinical mastitis, we're talking about bacterial shedding. And the inflection points here are at 200,000 somatic cell count and 2 million. So 2 million is when the diversity of the cells changes over to look more like acute mastitis. And below that, when they've looked at the cell composition, it's more just kind of chronic subclinical inflammation. And then below 200,000 as well. Doesn't seem to be related. So if we looked at a cut point of 800,000, and this was arbitrary based on some of the stuff out of Europe, we found that we had 60% of goats had over 800,000 somatic cell count. Main pathogens, no surprise, Coag-negative Staph, Staph aureus. So our findings led us to realize that we need subclinical mastitis prevention, so more udder hygiene, sorting goats according to somatic cell, and then the reduction of existing cases. So getting those goats out either by treating their subclinical mastitis or culling them. The other point that we're making was that post-kidding and before dry-off, we need to be screening these animals for somatic cell count. So good news overall coming out of that. Let's remove those high somatic cell count goats, and theoretically, that should help reduce the bulk tank individual bacterial counts. That went over like a lead balloon. We were like the Kachucks at a Canadian Thanksgiving, not very popular. No one wanted to hear our information, and it felt more like these guys at the castle, okay? So the dairy goat industry is not ready to hear that, didn't want to absorb any of that information going forward, and that's fine. So we worked on publishing the information and going from there. It always seems to take a crisis for the people to come back to you. Or for someone to come to you. So I was kind of hoping this farm would be like a small Amish farm that we could work quietly to see if the information that we found out actually worked to troubleshoot. No, we got one of the largest farms, one of the most vocal producers. That was like a week away from getting completely cut off because they had 1 million bacteria per milliliter on their back to scan. Okay, so this was urgent. Need to step up. Cathy put her big girl coveralls on and go and help this individual, okay? So they had no udder hygiene, and so we took the big leap. So if our study results are true, we should be able to screen by somatic cell count, sort those goats, and to determine a point at which the bulk tank will be below penalty range. So sounds good, right? I went down, we hand sampled on a Wednesday night all the milking goats, so over 900 animals. We did the Lactanet somatic cell count testing, sorted 3 pens by somatic cell count. After the milk pickup, I went down again on a Sunday evening and serially sampled the bulk tank as the goats were milked by pen. So we started with that empty bulk tank. Pen 1 had 500 goats, less than 1 million roughly. The next pen, and pen 3. So a lot of work to get to this point. Cathy had a sleepless night the night before. So as pen 1 went in, we sampled pen 2, pen 3. That's after pen 1, so below penalty range, as we hoped. Already after pen 2, we're over penalty at 600,000, and then pen 3, we're up to 1 million. But this was really cool that the producer could see the actual impact that's coming from the udder and influencing the bacterial count. We see it's the goats, right? So what we did is remove that pen, and the bulk tank pickup next time around was below penalty. This was awesome. The producer was so happy and excited. And then resolve, not so quick. About 2 weeks later, 60 goats kidded all at one time. Remember I said that they batch kidding, we can have 25% of the herd kind of turnover. He dumped them in pen 1. So this is our prize group, right? Our lowest somatic cell count. And we just dumped this whole mess of goats with all kinds of ranges of somatic cell count, okay? We went back in, pulled all those goats back out. We resorted them, culled the really high ones. And then the majority of them ended up going back in pen 3. We then reorganized these pens because we culled that last group completely. So when we talk about mental wellness, we have to talk about how hard it is to send 130, 150 goats on the truck, okay? Because they have a somatic cell count of like 4 million to upwards of 20 million. So that's really hard, and we struggled with that. But I just called this producer, and this is where we stand today at 185,000. We're still fluctuating a bit on the somatic cell count. This producer threw a buck in that far pen over there and spiked the somatic cell count. So it's really cool that we can go back and actually drive home these messages to the producer that, you know, yes, estrus is causing our somatic cell count to go up. I had one producer that has that big pen on the end with a really high somatic cell count pen. We milk milk once a day, that pen. So he can still maintain milk yield until he's able to feasibly and financially cull out those animals and bring that down. So a good news story, I have a friend for life now, and hopefully they're a bit more vocal and can share the information and be a bit more positive about some of the results that we found. We also incorporated culture with that. That's interesting findings. I could go on for an additional half an hour telling you a little bit about that, but helps us to troubleshoot even further. But we can demonstrate to producers the value of testing, see the influence that not subclinical mastitis, we're trying to get away from that term, but that somatic cell count has on bacterial shedding. So we're trying to come at it from the bulk tank side and say, because it's so hard to prove that somatic cell count is based on culture results and what have you, so we're just saying shedding for now. We can visibly quantify and justify the value of sorting by pen. They don't have to stay with it if they don't like that, but it's getting us away from that big fluctuation of those goats that kitted all being in one pen. And it's giving us a tool to manage the bulk tank numbers and troubleshoot. So hopefully, am I under my time, Stephen? Awesome. So my Field of Dreams quote, because I'm a huge baseball fan, was, if you build it, they will come. But I'm telling you, it's only in a moment of crisis. Okay? Anyway, thank you for your time.